Hi, welcome to the Breastfeeding Show. My name's Danielle. I'm also known as the Breastfeeding Mentor, and today I'm sharing 10 things that I wish I'd known about breastfeeding before I was actually breastfeeding. These things are adapted from my debut book, Self-Care, the Breastfeeding Edition, which is available now via the link in the caption. So the first thing that I wish I'd known before I was breastfeeding about breastfeeding is that it can take up to 6 days for your milk to come in after you've given birth. And that's not to say that before that time you don't produce any milk at all. Before then, you're producing colostrum, which your pregnant body has been producing since about 3 or 4 months pregnant. But particularly if you've had a cesarean section, it might take a little bit longer for your mature milk to come in. And if you're anything like me, that might leave you worrying if you're a new mom trying to breastfeed and your boobs are sore and hot and engorged, but you don't see any milk actually flowing out of them. But rest assured that your baby's tiny tummy is only the size of a marble for the first day or two after they're born, and only as big as a walnut by day 3. So as long as you are nursing on demand, or if your baby's struggling to latch on, that you are expressing regularly, you'll produce enough milk to meet your little one's growing needs. The second thing that I wish I'd known as a new nursing mom was just how crucial that golden hour after giving birth is. It's really easy to get swept up, perhaps if you have visitors in the hospital or wherever you give birth who immediately want to cuddle your newborn, but actually it's really important for your milk supply that in that first hour, at the very least after you've given birth, your little one is as close to you, ideally skin to skin, as possible, just to establish your milk supply and help you both to bond and just, thrive in that bubble of newborn bliss. The third thing that I wish I'd known as a new mom is that if, for whatever reason, your little one isn't able to latch onto you straight away, and many of them aren't, breastfeeding is a learning process and it takes time. It's important that you don't immediately rush to switch to formula and offer your baby a bottle. That is, of course, if you want to breastfeed. If you want to use formula, brilliant, you should absolutely do that. But if you're really keen to breastfeed, if you immediately offer your baby a bottle, then nipple confusion or nipple preference is really common, because when you're feeding a baby with a bottle, they don't really have to work for the food to come out. But if they're nursing, they have to actively be sucking on your breast and working their jaw and their facial muscles to get any milk out. And so if they don't have to do that, many babies just take the path of least resistance and they'll just prefer a bottle. Of course, if you want to do that, brilliant. But if you want to breastfeed, really important that if in those early days you aren't able to initially, or that you're separated from your baby, whoever is feeding your little one knows that you'd like them fed, either with a syringe, a cup or a spoon, just to try and avoid nipple confusion or nipple preference as much as possible. The fourth thing that I wish I'd known in those early days was just how important it was for establishing my milk supply, that even though initially my son couldn't latch on, I needed to express milk just to establish my supply for future weeks and months. So my boy was super sleepy after being born, and he slept almost for 24 hours consistently after I'd had an emergency section. And if I hadn't hand expressed or used a hospital grade pump just to stimulate that nursing sensation, then it would have been much more challenging, and it would be more challenging for you just to establish your nursing journey. And so if for whatever reason you're not able to nurse initially, really important that you express milk from your breasts, either using your hands or ideally with a hospital grade pump, just so that you can stimulate that nursing action and just get your body geared up and ready for producing milk. The fifth thing that I want to share is slightly controversial, and that is that doctors, nurses, and even midwives actually have very limited education, formal education about lactation. And as a consequence, in my personal experience and in dozens of messages that I've received from nursing moms all around the world, many medical professionals have very little or only their own personal experience of breastfeeding. Consequently, the advice that they give can be heavily biased towards formula and can be really detrimental to your nursing journey if you want to continue. And so I wish I had known in the early days that rather than going to speak to my GP, I would have been a lot better off contacting an IBCLC, an international board certified lactation consultant. You don't go to see an optician if you're struggling with toothache. And similarly, a lactation consultant really is the best person to speak to if you are having breastfeeding challenges. I wish I'd known that from day one, and yeah, quite frankly, save myself some confusion, and upset when I'd gone to see my GP. It was around 6 months after my son had been born, and I was really struggling with the lack of sleep. I was struggling to just figure out a rhythm that worked for our family. And when I went to see my GP, her advice was that I go away for the weekend, leave my boy, and by the time I returned, he'd be so angry at me that he wouldn't want to nurse anymore. Needless to say, I didn't listen to that terrible advice. I sought professional support from a lactation consultant, and it was everything that I needed and more. So if you are hesitating about contacting a lactation specialist, don't. If you're struggling with breastfeeding, I highly recommend that you seek one out. They know best, and it's as simple as that. The sixth thing that I wish I'd known as a new mom was cluster feeding. Oh my goodness, I had no idea that it was completely natural and completely normal for my son to sometimes be on the boob nursing for hours and hours at a time, morning, noon, and even overnight. I panicked that he either wasn't getting enough milk or just that it wasn't normal, and I was worried that it would last forever. Actually, if I just had a little bit more information and I'd known that it was completely normal and actually really important for establishing and maintaining my milk supply, I might have been a bit more relaxed in the early days. And so if you haven't heard of cluster feeding, it's when your baby nurses for, it could be hours at a time. Sometimes it might feel like it's 24/7, and they do that in order to signal to your breast to produce more milk. Breastfeeding works on a supply and demand basis, and so by nursing more frequently, perhaps if they're going through a growth spurt, they signal to your body to produce more milk for them, to keep them satisfied and to keep your supply healthy. It's not easy. It's definitely one of the trickier times some of the trickier times in my breastfeeding journey. But I think just knowing what to expect is really half the battle, and knowing that you don't have anything to worry about. Again, as long as your baby is gaining weight and they are producing enough wet nappies each day, you don't need to worry that they are nursing what may feel like constantly. They're just doing that to signal to your body to produce a little bit more milk. If you speak to any new parent, sleep is likely to be the hottest topic of your conversation. And as a new nursing mom, I was desperate to find any kind of quick fix and magic solution for my boy's wakefulness. I had no idea that it was completely normal for my then 9-month-old to be waking so frequently at night and nursing throughout the night for comfort, reassurance, for whatever reason. On the topic of sleep, it was the very first time that my boy ever latched onto me in hospital. It was around 3:45 in the morning, and I was overjoyed that he was awake enough to be able to nurse and that we were finally on our nursing journey. And I was super worried because all of a sudden I just felt these really intense, like almost completely irresistible urge to fall asleep. I was sitting up in hospital. I just had a cesarean section. I was trying to get comfortable, but as my boy nursed, I could not resist the temptation to close my eyes. It wasn't just that I was tired, but this overwhelming feeling that I now know to be what's known as the letdown reflex, and this release of oxytocin, this love hormone, and of sleep hormones. I didn't know that was completely normal and natural, and actually Mother Nature's way of making sure that I got the rest that I needed too. We are obsessed in the West, I think, with forcing babies to be independent before they really need to be, actually. And across many parts of the world, co-sleeping and breast sleeping is the norm. It would have saved me a lot of anxiety, a lot of heartache, and a lot of lost sleep if I had known from day one how to safely bed share and breast sleep with my boy. And breast sleeping is when you, well, it's just what it says on the tin. It's when you are nursing your baby and you're sleeping with them too. And there are safe ways to do this. And actually, it's really the most natural and normal practice in the history of humanity. I think it is a massive shame that it's not promoted more, particularly in the Western world, because I really think that it would do wonders for breastfeeding rates and for so many mums' mental and physical wellness. The Lullaby Trust has up-to-date research and recommendations on safe co-sleeping and bed sharing, and I highly recommend that you check them out if you would like some more advice on that. The ninth thing that I wish I had known in the early days but didn't is that breastfeeding in public is protected by law across the whole of the UK, Ireland, in all 50 US states and Australia. And it's also the case in much of the rest of the world, or it's widely accepted, even if it's not written in law. And I think as a new mom, you just have so much to worry about already. And if you're maybe struggling with your nursing journey, it's so helpful to know that the law is on your side. And if you need to breastfeed whenever, wherever, you are legally protected. And actually it's against the law for anyone to ask you to move or to tell you to stop. The 10th thing that I wish I had known about breastfeeding in the early days is that actually our nursing journey is between my son and I and absolutely no one else. Moms come under scrutiny all the time, whether it's choices about how your baby sleeps, how they eat, how they behave, how you comfort them. The list is endless. And I think it would be so great if from day one, every mother knew that however I feed my baby, through choice or necessity, it's absolutely fine. Whether I breastfeed for 3 hours, 3 days, or 3 years, if that's what I want to do, and if it's working for my family and my child or my children, that's all that matters. I really feel that the terms breast is best or fed is best are really detrimental, actually, and they're not helpful for anyone. As a mom, to be able to make the best choices from your family, all you need is support. You need support, you need education, you don't need judgment and others telling you what is and isn't the best thing for you. Actually, only you and your family know what's right for you in your unique circumstances. And so however long you want to breastfeed for or not is absolutely fine. And it really has nothing to do with your worth as a mother. Having said that, if you do love breastfeeding, I mean, I absolutely love nursing my son. For me, it's about connection and comfort, and yeah, it's such a special time for us when we nurse to just be together and take a moment to be still in what, might be a crazy day. And if you are enjoying your breastfeeding journey, but actually you just need a little bit of support in maybe looking after yourself a little bit better, then I highly recommend this bad boy. I wrote this book because I struggled so much in the early days just to know how to look after myself as I was nurturing my son. And I wrote it for everyone that I love, for my sisters if they have children, for my best friends. These are the tips, there are 50 tips here. They're practical, they're evidence-based, and they're the things that I wish I had known and understood from day one of my nursing journey. I really hope you've enjoyed this video and that you've learned something today. If you have, tap the subscribe button and watch out for next week's video. Thank you so much for joining me. Take care.